My body began to go numb 2 hours after being locked in the freezer, each breath feeling as if it were freezing in my chest. In a fog, I clearly heard Aiden's voice, the son I had once been so proud of and loved unconditionally outside the door. "Freeze to death, you old monkey." In that instant, I felt my heart crack. The pain wasn't only that death was near, but that my own flesh and blood had turned a mother's love into a knife of betrayal. I bit down hard, counting each heartbeat to keep from collapsing, and after relentless struggle I was finally rescued after 7 hours in that icy hell. And from that moment on, the cruel son who had tried to take his mother's life would pay a price that would cost him his whole life. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Virginia Cole, 74 years old. My entire life has been defined by work. I was born and raised in Dayton, Ohio, in a blue-collar family. From early on, I learned that dollars don't fall from the sky. You earn them with calloused hands and a full day on your feet behind the counter. When my husband Thomas and I decided to open a little corner shop, plenty of neighbors looked at us with doubt. "In this town, stores die fast. What makes you two different?" they said. But we believed in patience, in listening to customers, remembering every name and every favorite item. Every modest profit we tucked away to expand. One store became 2, then 3, then 5. I still remember the day we opened the first supermarket. Thomas wore an old but neatly pressed suit, and I wore a pale blue dress I sewed myself. We cut the ribbon with tears in our eyes, looking back at how far we'd come from nothing. Our first customers were the old neighbors they came to buy and to support, and my heart felt so warm. All along I was a wife, a mother, and Thomas's right hand. I worked the register, kept the books, watched the kids, and helped with homework at a tiny table behind the shop. My 3 children grew up with the smell of receipt paper, the ding of the cash drawer, and their parents' weary but hopeful voices. Aiden, my firstborn, was different from the start. He liked to watch me balance the books, asked what the numbers meant, and did mental math faster than the calculator. I used to brag to customers, "This one's going to take over someday." I wasn't wrong, but I never imagined that taking over would turn into tragedy. Nora, my middle child, is gentle, loves the arts, and never cared much for business. Lucas, the youngest, cheerful and drawn to the kitchen, later opened his own restaurant in Chicago. To me, each child had a different spirit, and I loved them each in their own way. But Aiden, with his sharp mind and ambition always, made me both proud and quietly uneasy. Thomas died suddenly in the company office one afternoon in October. He collapsed at his desk from a heart attack before anyone could get him to the hospital. I lost my partner in life, the one who walked every step with me in building our world. In those grieving days, many urged me to sell most of the company and retire. But I knew if Thomas were alive, he'd never let me quit, so I stayed and kept steering the ship, even with a heart still raw. By then, Aiden was CFO, an MBA with experience running the finances. He suggested I let him handle all the books, while I kept my name on everything and just showed up for the big events. I thought, he's my son, he's educated, he's experienced, and he wants to carry the load. What reason do I have to doubt? I agreed, partly from trust, partly from exhaustion. Then small signs began to appear. Financial reports got shorter, the numbers fuzzier. Loyal employees of many years were suddenly restructured out of jobs. Longtime suppliers, decades in, were replaced by unfamiliar names. When I asked, Aiden always said, "Mom, this is the new trend, you don't get it. Let me handle it." I wanted to believe. But a mother's heart and the instincts of someone who's spent a lifetime in business told me something was off. Then the day came. Aiden asked me to go check the walk-in freezer at the main store. He said the temperature system had issues, needed my input, the founder, so the staff would respect it. I agreed gladly. Ruth, our longtime cleaning staff, came along to tidy up. As we stepped in, I even joked to my son, "When I was young, I used to nap on these frozen crates." Aiden forced a smile, bent over the thermometer. And then, in a blink, he stepped out, and the latch snapped. I spun around. The heavy steel door had sealed. I pounded and shouted, but the sound just bounced back at me. Through the small window, I caught a glimpse of Aiden's eyes, not startled or accidental, but cold and calculating. Then his figure faded. It was just me, Ruth, and the tightening cold. Time stretched into forever. The cold cut like knives. My head began to swim. Ruth was shaking. I held her, trying to keep warmth with whatever we could find. I remembered articles I'd read, remembered the SOS pattern. I grabbed a metal bar and tapped the shelving. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. I didn't know if anyone could hear, but I had to try, had to live. 7 hours, the longest 7 hours of my life. My fingers went numb, lips cracked, heart racing, and then slowing. I almost gave up more than once, but I thought of Thomas, of Nora and Lucas, of the years of sweat we'd poured into this, and I forced one more breath. At last, when a line of light slipped through and voices rushed in, I knew I had survived. People called it a miracle. I knew it was stubbornness, pure survival instinct from a woman who's never bowed. And right then, on the hospital gurney, I made a decision. I would pretend to be forgetful. I would let Aiden believe the shock wiped my memory, that I wasn't a threat. In the shadows, I would gather step-by-step evidence, plans to unmask the unfilial, ruthless son who treated his own mother as an obstacle to be removed. From the moment I slipped past that steel door, I stepped into a different phase. Every breath, every glance, every word could be evidence or a trap. I could not afford a single careless move, and I could not show a hint of suspicion about Aiden. If I wanted to expose him, I had to be patient. In the hospital, I kept quiet, faking confusion at the simplest questions. When a nurse asked where I was, I smiled and gave the wrong answer. When a doctor asked what day it was, I acted puzzled, stared out the window and mumbled, "Maybe Sunday, though it was Wednesday." I practiced being the confused old lady, and the more I played it, the more Aiden believed it. But inside that fragile shell, I began to act. The night shift nurse, Bianca Reyes, was the first person I trusted. Bianca, about 40, with bright brown eyes and a kind smile, once whispered to me, "You don't seem like someone with memory loss. I think you're sharp as ever." That made me open up. One night, with the hallway quiet, I tugged Bianca's sleeve and whispered, "Do you know where I can buy a tiny recorder?" She looked startled. "What for?" "To stay alive," I said evenly. "I need to capture what people say around me." The next day, Bianca slipped me a small recorder, no bigger than a lighter, matte black. She helped me charge it and showed me the button. We stitched it into the hem of my hospital gown where no one would look. That night I lay still, listening to the faint click, the start of a silent war between mother and son. I needed allies outside. I called Owen Price, my nephew, my sister's boy. Owen works as an internal accountant at the company, careful and principled. I trust him because I once saw him argue face-to-face with Aiden over a sketchy expense. Using an old phone Bianca lent me, I called from the hospital bathroom when no one was watching. Owen's voice choked when he heard I was alive. "Auntie, I thought you—" I cut in, steady. "Owen, listen, I need you to track the cash flows. Look for companies getting paid for services that don't exist." 2 days later, Owen confirmed it. Recurring transfers, regular as clockwork, to shell companies with no real service. Money was being siphoned from Cole's market. I needed an experienced mind. I called David Merrick, Thomas's longtime friend, and our former retirement advisor. David, a few years older than me, white-haired but sharp. After I explained, his voice went low. Virginia, this isn't just embezzlement. I see a hand organizing a whole network, and the authorized agent behind those shells is Aiden. I gripped the handset, feeling my blood turn to ice, but I kept my voice level. David, narrow it down. I want every document, every company name, and especially the life insurance policy details. As I suspected, a few weeks before the accident in the freezer, a multi-million-dollar policy had been taken out in my name, with Aiden Cole as the sole beneficiary. I understood. If I wasn't careful, there wouldn't be a second chance. To make Aiden reveal more, I called his voicemail and played confused, babbling, "Aiden, honey, I forgot. Which lake are you taking me to, Erie or that lake house?" An hour later, Aiden stormed into my hospital room, scowling. "Mom, don't you ever mention the lake house in front of Nora and Lucas. This is just between us." That scolding and his fluster were captured perfectly. Another brick in my wall of proof. Each recording, Bianca and I quietly copied to a small USB and hid it in a vitamin bottle. Whenever we could, I'd whisper to her, "We're building a bridge, don't let it snap midway." She nodded, eyes set with resolve. Meanwhile, Ruth, the woman trapped in the freezer with me, slowly recovered. She still panicked at the slam of a steel door. I held her hand and said, "For now, don't tell anyone. Your safety matters more. We need time." Ruth nodded through tears, and I saw trust in her eyes. One day, a young doctor showed up, introduced as someone Aiden arranged. He talked a lot about cognitive decline in older adults, hinting my condition might not improve. I sat quietly while the recorder hummed in my hem. I answered half lucid, half foggy, to make them believe my memory was truly shaky. But every suggestion he made, every paper he tried to slide in front of me to sign, I recorded. More and more, I saw it clearly. Aiden didn't just want the money. He wanted my dignity, and my voice wanted to paint me as a senile old woman to legitimize everything he did. But Aiden forgot one thing. I've spent a lifetime behind a counter, counting every penny, dealing with every kind of customer and vendor. I know tricks. I know lies, and above all, I'm not so easily erased. Patiently, day by day, hour by hour, I gathered his own incriminating words and the traces he left. I filed them neatly in my mind, in my heart, and on tiny USB drives tucked away. I had once trembled in the freezer's dark. Now it was Aiden who didn't see that night was closing in on his own life. Those hospital days, amid the smell of disinfectant and the cold glow of fluorescent lights, I began to see the real picture. Every piece from Bianca, from Owen, from David, clicked into a mosaic that hurt just to think about. But I couldn't stop at audio clips or hints. I needed proof that couldn't be denied, the fingerprints Aiden left on our family assets. One morning, when a nurse wheeled me for tests, I took the chance to stop by the county's public records office. At my age, people might think an old lady can't sneak. I didn't have to. I'm still the legal owner of plenty of assets. With that status, I have the right to pull land records. In the thick stack of files, my eyes landed on the industrial park lot, the land Thomas fought hard to buy and treated as capital for expanding store number 3. I remember the day we signed the papers. And now, it had been transferred to a company called CR Holdings at a bargain basement price less than a third of its value. My hands trembled as I turned to the last page, the one with the signature. Under seller, my name, Virginia Cole, was printed clearly. The first letter V was dragged out too long, and the G curled in a strange way, like whoever wrote it tried to mimic my hand but didn't understand my habits. I exhaled and remembered the safe Thomas kept in the office. Inside, we stored original signature samples for verification. If I could get that reference file, the different pen strokes would be obvious. While I was digging through land records, Owen never stopped working. One evening he called me, his voice tight with worry. "Auntie, I just reviewed the revenue numbers for store number 3. Foot traffic is steady some weeks, even up, but sales have dropped off a cliff. The POS system isn't flagging errors, which means someone's tampering. I listened in silence, feeling a fresh sheet of ice spread over my heart. I've spent thousands of hours at a register. I know every penny a customer hands back. There's no way heavy traffic pairs with a vertical drop in sales unless someone's skimming. Owen went on. There's a new vendor called Pioneer North. They're invoicing at twice the price of the old supplier, and no one in the store has ever seen them. I looked up their address. It's just a rented-by-the-hour virtual office in Columbus. Once again, Aiden's fingerprints were all over it. David, with a seasoned financial advisor's eye, mapped out the money flows. I sat in my hospital room, looking at the pages he sent through a secure channel. Arrows, crisscrossed boxes, each line a stream of cash leaving the company I bled for. From Cole's Market, David explained on a call, the money moves to shell companies. From there it goes through a pass-through account, then lands in an investment under Aiden's name, that Lake House in Hocking Hills. I closed my eyes and drew a long breath. Hocking Hills, the place families go for weekends, red forests and still lakes. For me, it had turned into the symbol of a murder plot. That house wasn't a retreat, it was the grave Aiden meant to dig for me. I knew I had to get Aiden talking, to make him expose himself. One afternoon he visited me in the hospital carrying flowers like a dutiful son. I looked at him and feigned gratitude. "You've worked so hard, Aiden. Since your father passed, you've carried everything. I know it's been heavy." His eyes lit up. He sat on the edge of the bed, voice full of self-satisfaction. "You're right. I've done it all. Without me, this company would have collapsed. Business is business, Mom. Ethics are just extra details. Everyone wants to survive, and I chose the only way not to get buried." I swallowed hard, but under the sheet my fingers pressed the record button. Every word he said, every breath, every second of self-incrimination went into that tiny device. I didn't stop at his words. I got a critical document too. Once, while Aiden stepped out to take a call, I quietly opened the briefcase he'd carelessly left on the table. In the stack, one form jumped out. A life insurance policy for $5 million. Beneficiary: Aiden Cole. I went still. A death sentence disguised in cold legal language. He didn't just want to embezzle. He wanted to turn my death into capital for a new life. Using a backup phone, I photographed the entire policy and sent it to David and Owen. Then I set it back in the case as if I'd never touched it. That night, I lay awake in the hospital bed, listening to the monitor tick off each heartbeat. I knew I had damning evidence: forged signatures, shell companies, dirty cash flows, the insurance policy. But if I exposed it too soon, Aiden would have time to cover his tracks or strike back. I whispered into the dark, "Not yet, Virginia. Let the trap close tighter." I chose silence. I chose to let him believe I was weak, confused, harmless. Meanwhile, each piece of evidence stacked into a wall, waiting to collapse on the head of the unfilial son I once loved without limits. When I turned to Ruth, the one still shaken by the freezer's cold, I just squeezed her hand and said, "Don't be afraid. The truth will come out. But right now, we wait. We wait for the right moment." She nodded, eyes wet. I knew I was comforting her and myself. Ahead lay a battle only beginning, and I, a 72-year-old woman, would have to see it through. Not just to save myself, but to protect the honor of a lifetime's work and a man already gone. The day Aiden walked into my room, his polished shoes clicking softly on the floor, I knew what was coming. He sat in the chair by my bed, smiling like a dutiful son, and spoke slowly. "Mom, I think it's time you left the hospital. The air here is stifling. I've set everything up at the lake house. You'll rest there. No one will bother you." I tilted my head, playing confused. "Lake house? Oh, right, I guess. If you've arranged it, I'm at ease." But I want a private nurse by my side. You know I forget. I might fall. He nodded, eyes flickering. I could see he didn't want an outsider, but he couldn't refuse outright. When Aiden left, Bianca came in, drew the curtain, and checked the IV. I leaned toward her and whispered, "Tomorrow he wants to take me. He keeps calling it the lake house." Bianca tightened her grip on my wrist, her eyes darkening. "You can't go alone. I'll attach a tracker to your hospital card. Wherever he takes you, we'll know." I nodded, the storm rising inside me while my face stayed soft and frail like a resigned old lady's. That evening I practiced my role harder. When Aiden returned, I held his hand and smiled blankly. "You're so capable, Aiden, just like your father used to be. You make me feel safe." His eyes brightened, then dimmed. His voice dropped with a hard edge. "Dad, he never understood me, always comparing me to other people, but you'll see I'm about to restructure the whole board. No one's going to stand in my way." His words flashed venom like a snake no longer bothering to hide its fangs. I lowered my head to make him think I missed it, while my hand under the blanket clenched bone white. The night before discharge, close to midnight, I heard the door ease open. Aiden slipped in. I let my eyes droop as if drugged. He went to my phone, swiped fast, and turned on location. Tracking. I heard the faint beep when he enabled it. My heart pounded, but my body stayed still, my breath even like a deep sleeper. After he left, I opened my eyes and watched his silhouette fade. In that moment I knew my son had decided my fate, and tomorrow would be the final hand. Morning came, and I prepared. The tiny recorder was clipped neatly inside my thick sweater. Every move, every breath, it would catch. I tucked the USB with all the evidence into the base of my cane where no one would think to look. Nora and Lucas, my other two, called, begging to bring me home. I swallowed and refused in a feeble voice. "I know you love me, but let Aiden handle it. I don't want arguments. I'm tired." I heard their worry and disappointment, and it cut like a knife. But I couldn't blow the plan. One small slip and Aiden would smell it. That afternoon, Owen visited. He sat on the bed's edge and whispered, "You're really going with him?" I nodded, staring off. "It's the only way to make him say it himself. Follow at about 3 miles. And remember, call Sheriff Grant Holloway only when you hear the exact signal." "What's the signal?" I gripped Owen's hand. "When I mention Airy, you'll know it's time." That night I lay in bed, strangely calm. After months of trembling, the truth had turned me to stone. I ran the evidence sequence in my head. Forged signature on the land transfer. Store number 3's sales plunge despite steady traffic. Shell vendor Pioneer North, virtual office. Money flow chart leading to the lake house. Life insurance for $5 million. Beneficiary, Aiden Cole. His own words, "Business is business, ethics are extra." All the pieces locked in. I only lacked one thing, his mouth, the confession no one could deny. As moonlight slid through the hospital window, I whispered to myself, "Son, tomorrow I'll let you dig your own grave. And I, with whatever strength I have left, will stand up for what your father built." In the dark, I felt it more clearly than ever. The snake had shown itself. It only had to strike. And I, the woman once written off as a confused old lady, would be the one to make it pay. On discharge morning, I pulled on a thick sweater, took my cane, and shuffled slowly like a dependent old woman. Aiden steadied my arm, playing the tender son any onlooker would praise. Only I knew the impatience in his eyes wasn't love. It was the urge to finish the game. A glossy black SUV waited at the exit. The door shut, and I sat in the front seat, hearing the cold click of the seatbelt. Aiden started the engine, turned the wheel hard, and we pulled away in silence. I tilted my head and feigned a dazed stare, but my eyes tracked the route. At first, we followed the highway, the same road I'd driven countless times on deliveries. I remembered each mile marker, each gas station. But after about 15 minutes, Aiden suddenly turned onto a narrow lane, a rutted red dirt road full of potholes. I hesitated, voice frail like a muddled old woman. You said Hocking Hills. This road doesn't go there. Aiden smiled, but it was a tight, hard smile. Shortcut, Mom. I know this road. It'll be faster. I nodded, eyelids drooping like I didn't care. But in my head, I counted every mile marker, every big shrub along the shoulder, the same habit I had years ago behind the wheel of a delivery truck, crisscrossing the state. Count to remember, to keep from getting lost, to hold on to any scrap of control. In my coat pocket, the secret phone buzzed once, barely. I didn't pull it out, just tilted, palm pressed against it like an accident. The signal said, Owen and David Merrick were tailing us. Sheriff Grant Holloway had been alerted. Patrol cars were staged along the route. That small comfort steadied me. I knew I wasn't alone. The dirt road stretched forever, dust caking the windshield. After a bend, a derelict farm appeared, a rotting wood house, rusted tin roof, a patchy yard like clawed animal hide. Beside it, an old concrete well covered with a cracked, half-rotten plank. We stopped. Aiden cut the engine and turned to me. The fake smile was gone, replaced by a cold, stripped-down stare. Mom, he said slowly, you're too stubborn. I thought the freezer would teach you the lesson. I drew a long breath and sat up straight. The flimsy mask I'd worn for weeks slid aside. My voice came out clear, even, you just confessed, Aiden. He lifted a brow, surprised for a beat, then laughed dry, like stones rolling on steel. Confessed? So what? You've lived too long. This company needs a jump. Once you're gone, the insurance makes us whole. I'll take Cole's Market to the next level. That's the real legacy. I kept my hands from shaking, thumb brushing the recorder clipped inside my sweater, making sure every word he said was safely saved. Outside, wind swept the yard, kicking up a brown haze. I looked straight into Aiden's eyes and saw a stranger, nothing left of the little boy who once hid behind my skirt. Only a cold man drunk on the fantasy of power. You call that a legacy? I said softly, almost a whisper but loud enough. A legacy built on your mother's blood? Aiden shrugged and jutted his chin toward the ruined house. Blood or sweat, what's the difference? Business is business. The strong live, the weak disappear. That's it. My heart cinched tight, but on the surface I stayed calm. I had prepared for this moment. Right then, a different sound rolled in from a distance. Multiple engines, echoing down the narrow dirt lane. Dust rose like a pale cloud, then headlights cut through. Aiden scowled, sprang from his seat, eyes narrowing. Who's following us? I smiled quiet, threaded with pain and pride. People who believe me, son. He snapped toward me, eyes burning, jaw locked. I knew his mind was sprinting for an escape, but every exit was blocked. In that instant, something in me loosened, not because I was about to win, but because the truth was finally in daylight. All those years of patience, love, and bottomless hurt led to this minute. The snake had shown its fangs, and that venom would be the proof to finish him. Sirens wailed. Red and blue lights washed across the wasteland of a yard. I sat still in the passenger seat, hand resting on my cane, listening to tires bite into dirt. Sheriff Grant Holloway and 2 deputies stepped out, their tall shadows cutting through the dust. Owen jogged up from the car behind, a memory card clenched in his hand, the sum of weeks Bianca and I spent quietly recording. Mrs. Virginia? Grant nodded to me, then faced Aiden. His voice was steady, firm. Aiden Cole, you're under arrest for suspected attempted murder, financial fraud, and document forgery. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used as evidence in court. Aiden ripped his hands off the wheel, face flushed. I watched his forearm muscles strain like he might bolt. He growled, "You've got nothing. It's all lies from a senile old woman." Owen stepped forward and handed Grant the memory card. "It's all here. Recordings from the hospital to this drive today. Full admissions." A metallic click. The cuffs snapped shut around Aiden's wrists. He thrashed, eyes bloodshot, glaring at me, hissing through his teeth. "You'll regret this, Mom. You ruined everything." I looked at my son, heart twisting, but my voice stayed oddly calm. "My son died the day you shut that freezer door." In the ambulance for a medical check, I lay silent. The immediate danger had passed, yet I shook head to toe. Not from fear, but from a funeral no one could see, grieving a living child who saw his mother as the enemy. No blood pressure cuff could capture that pain. It sat in my chest, an emptiness that would never fill. News traveled, faster than I expected. Within 2 days the city buzzed. Aiden Cole arrested. Big headlines in the local paper, Cole's Market photos under the banner. Customers whispered in the aisles, murmuring between shelves. The owner's son plotted to kill his mother to take the company. Cole's Market staggered. Day one sales plunged. Shareholders panicked. But I refused to be the poor victim the papers wanted to paint. I have never been just a victim. I am the keeper of Thomas's legacy, the protector of the honest employees who kept showing up. Bianca stepped into the light too. Meeting with the DA, she submitted a full account of how she helped me from the act of playing confused, to stitching a recorder into my gown, to backing up files to a USB hidden in a pill bottle. She said, "Mrs. Virginia was never as weak as she pretended. She knew exactly what she was doing. I only assisted." Ruth, the woman trapped in the freezer with me, also testified. Her voice shook, recalling the cries, the banging, the faint SOS we sent out. She said, "I thought I was dead, but Mrs. Virginia held me and whispered not to give up. Without her, I wouldn't be here." A thick case file landed on the county prosecutor's desk. Attempted murder, fraud, money laundering, forgery. Enough charges to turn Aiden's shine into iron shackles. On the day I signed the final documents, I sat alone in my office before Thomas's photo. My hand trembled around the pen. I knew every stroke would push Aiden deeper into the system. Tears surged. I bit my lip until it bled. "I've done everything to protect this family," I whispered to the frame. But our son chose betrayal. I broke down once, only once, then wiped my face. From that second on, I sat upright and opened the recovery plan file. Pages crowded with notes and red marks, the only path to keep Cole's Market from sinking. My first day back at headquarters, walking into the conference room, everyone stared. Some lowered their gaze, some looked away, some cried. I smiled, voice firm. "I'm not here to mourn. I'm here to continue. Cole's Market does not die with Aiden's mistakes." That night I went home and sat alone in the living room. The clock struck 12. I laid a hand over the ache in my chest. The pain hadn't left, but my hands were steadier than ever. I knew I had to keep going. For Thomas. For my other children. For the hundreds of employees and customers who trust us. And most of all, for my own dignity, a woman nearly 8 decades in, who's tasted sweet and bitter, and never once let anyone define her by the word victim. I knew some moments aren't just to survive. They're meant to be carved in stone. For me, that was the next morning, the company's anniversary, the business Thomas and I built from a corner store. I chose that exact day to come back, to turn the annual meeting into a public reckoning for those who betrayed our legacy. From the moment the car stopped at headquarters, the air felt heavy. In the hallway, employees' eyes flicked over me. Respect, pity, fear. I walked slow but solid, cane tapping. A navy blazer on my narrow shoulders, the silk scarf Thomas once gave me at my neck, a reminder he still watched every step. The conference room was packed. Directors, managers, key staff. In the back row stood veteran floor workers, the ones who hauled the first boxes with us years ago. At the head table, they'd set a small side chair for me, like a decorative piece. In the middle, the chair's seat, rightfully mine, was already taken by one of Aiden's loyalists. I went straight there, ignoring the startled looks. The man jumped up, stammering, "Mrs. Cole, we set a seat for you over there. It'll be more comfortable." I planted my cane on the floor, voice not loud but carrying, "Most comfortable for me is this one. This is the chair's seat. As long as I'm alive, it's mine." Silence dropped over the room. I opened like the old meetings. "First, thank you all for being here. Together we've been through everything from a small family shop to one of the state's largest supermarket chains. Cole's Market has always stood for honesty, hard work, and responsibility to our community." Faces softened, a few scattered claps. I paused, then shifted tone. "And today I have to say something painful. 40% of this company's assets have been siphoned off over the last 3 years." A low roar of whispers. I signaled to Christopher and Owen. They handed out thick bound packets to everyone. I continued, steady, like reading straight from my heart. "Inside, you'll find the map of money flows leaving the company through shell entities. Here is the forged signature used to sell our industrial land for pennies. And here is a life insurance policy for $5 million with one beneficiary, Aiden Cole." On the left row, 3 directors who had signed those sham contracts all stood up at once. Their faces went pale, lips trembling. One tried to walk out, but the back door had been locked by internal security. I stared straight at them without blinking. Then I nodded to the tech. The big screen lit up with an audio clip. Aiden's voice echoed through the room, cold and bare. "The freezer. Fast. Not much pain." The whole room groaned. Some people covered their mouths. A few sobs broke from the workers in the back rows. I could hear each heavy breath bouncing in my chest. I stood, braced both hands on the table, and said loud and clear, "From this minute, I declare, the current board of directors is suspended. I'm granting emergency authority to the financial and legal recovery team to put Cole's Market back on the right track." Chairs scraped everywhere. The faces that had thrived under Aiden scrambled to argue. But right then, the door opened. Sheriff Grant Holloway walked in holding a stack of arrest warrants. 2 officers moved quickly behind him. "Those 3," he pointed straight at the directors, "are under arrest for aiding and abetting fraud and attempted murder." Handcuffs clicked. They dropped their heads as they were led past the rows. I watched them go, my heart aching yet lighter. The last abscess had finally been cut out. I turned back and swept the room with my eyes. "If you can hold to the ethics of our trade, if you can stay honest, stay with me. If you can't, leave this house right now." A minute of dead silence. Then, from the very back, the old-timers, the folks who once stocked shelves and hauled boxes with me and Thomas, stood and clapped. It started tentative, then rolled forward until the whole room thundered. Tears stung and salted my lips. The people who truly understood Cole's Market, the ones who saw it as family, not just a job, were still here. And they gave me the strength to believe that, after everything, our legacy still mattered. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in my office with the yellow lamp pooling on the desk. I opened Thomas's old notebook where he once wrote, "We don't sell goods, we serve people." I set my shaking hand on the page and whispered, "Today, Thomas, we won." But it didn't come from scheming. It came from truth and from people. Outside the glass, Cole's Market headquarters glowed, and in my chest, for the first time in months, a small light of hope rose up. Suspending the old board was only step 1. To save Cole's Market, I needed more than speeches and handcuffs. This business is a living body, its arteries clogged with dirty money, fake contracts, and careless hands. If we didn't clear them, it would die. I wouldn't allow it. I signed with Naomi Pierce and Associates, a Columbus law firm known for turning companies around after crises. Naomi, a salt and pepper-haired woman with a quick stride, shook my hand hard. "Mrs. Cole, we've read the file. This won't be easy, but I see a path." In the first week, her team scrubbed every contract. They crossed out dozens of phantom vendors and cut off the shell companies. Real vendors were forced back to the table. Pricing, terms, everything transparent. I sat in the room and listened to every word. At 72, I felt like the young woman I'd been, bargaining down to the penny to protect my family's margin. At the same time, I brought back the people Aiden had pushed aside. Bill Henderson, a 30-year warehouse vet, returned with calloused hands and a mind that remembered every lot number. Marjorie Lane, the manager of store number 3, got her job back after speaking up about the revenue anomalies, and Arthur Grant, the chief accountant who'd retired early over differences with the new leadership, returned to lead reconciliations. When they walked into HQ, I stood to greet them, eyes wet. Cole's Market never lost its soul. It was only covered up for a while. Help me bring it back. We set up a new financial system, a central treasury with dual signature controls. No money leaves without at least 2 approvals. Every transaction is logged, traceable step by step. I wanted anyone who dared touch a single dollar at Cole's Market in the future to know, your footprints will be stamped where they can't be erased. To rebuild trust, I rolled out a quarterly transparency report. We live-streamed from the conference room and invited customers, the press, and employees. I sat in front of the camera and didn't hide. Here's what was lost, here's what we're doing, and here's what we commit to. Hundreds of comments scrolled by, anger, encouragement, tears. But I knew only by facing it head-on would we earn forgiveness. I launched Warm Weekend Kitchen, where Cole's Market set aside food for local families in need. Every Saturday, a long line formed outside our largest store. I went myself, handing out bags with the team. Bread, milk, meat, vegetables. Hands shook when they took them. Grateful eyes reminded me I still had reasons to go on. "We don't just sell," I told the team. "We keep people warm. That's what Thomas and I started for." Sales plunged for the first months. The papers chattered. Customers stayed wary. There were moments I thought I wouldn't hold, but day by day, familiar faces returned. A young mom holding her child looked at me and smiled. "I'm here because I trust you." Those words were worth more than any contract. The numbers in the reports edged up from losses to break even, then a hair of profit. Trust had started to flow back. Meanwhile, Naomi's legal team filed motions to claw back stolen assets. Accounts tied to CR Holdings were frozen. I heard the news in my office and sat quiet for a long time. It wasn't just money. It was proof the truth had finally won. Most important, I refused to be just a chair in a chair. Every afternoon I hobbled to the main store and ran a register for 2 hours. I scanned items, counted out change, asked, "How's your family today?" People stared. "The owner herself at the checkout?" I smiled, because I want folks to see me here like the old days. It wasn't just work. It was a reminder that Cole's Market is still a place for families, for community, for real people. On the weekend, when I locked the cash drawer and looked out the glass at the lit parking lot, I realized something. The flow was coming back. The arteries were clearing. Cole's Market wasn't dying. It was healing slowly, steadily, and I, with all my lingering hurt, was leading it like before. When the trial opened, I walked into the county courthouse on firm legs, though my heart felt like stone. The gallery was packed, reporters jostled, cameras pointed at me. I didn't care about the flashes. All I saw was Aiden, my firstborn, behind the partition, hands on the table, wearing an orange jumpsuit. His head was bowed, face drawn, but his eyes didn't flicker. When the judge asked for his plea, his lawyer rose, voice full of confidence. "Your Honor, my client suffered severe psychological shock after his father's death. Thomas Cole was his only anchor, and that loss pushed Aiden into a breakdown, causing him to act out of control." Hearing it, the whole room felt like it froze. My years of pain, all that hard evidence twisted into a story about mental collapse. I gripped my cane but stayed silent. The prosecutor stood and flipped on the big screen. The recordings played, word for word, those familiar hissing lines that made the jury stare at Aiden without blinking. The freezer. Fast, not much pain. Business is business. Ethics are just an extra detail. Insurance will make up the losses. She just needs to disappear. No one breathed hard. The jury sat like stone. Those words weren't suspicions or guesses anymore, they were bare truth. When it was my turn on the stand, my voice shook but stayed clear. I asked the court to protect two people. Nurse Bianca Reyes, who helped me hide the recorder, and Ruth, the woman locked in the freezer with me. They risked their lives to bring the truth out. Please don't let them face threats or retaliation. In the gallery, I saw Nora bow her head, tears running nonstop. Lucas sat upright, his hand gripped mine as I stepped down. He didn't say a word, but that squeeze held all the pain, anger, and leftover love of a family. Finally, the verdict came. The judge read each count, voice ringing through the room. 30 years in prison for attempted murder with intent, 12 additional years for financial fraud, money laundering, and forgery. 42 years in total. The number fell like a blade. I sat with my fingers laced, heart churning. Aiden looked up at me for a moment, no rage left, just emptiness. A few weeks later, I went to the prison once, only once. We sat across the glass. I picked up the phone and asked the one question that had lived in me for months. "Why, Aiden? Why that choice?" He looked at me, the corner of his mouth twitching in a bitter, almost smile. "Because waiting for you to die naturally took too long." I set the phone down, no goodbye, no extra words. Walking out through the heavy steel gate, I knew I'd just buried a part of my memory. The 5-year-old who once grabbed my leg and called me Mom. That child no longer exists. I had to lay him to rest inside me, a funeral without incense or flowers. The press kept calling and emailing, asking for interviews, wanting to hear the story of a victim who overcame tragedy. I turned them all down. To everyone, I said one thing: doing what's right is enough. I didn't want to be turned into a pity piece. I didn't want to tie myself to tragedy. I wanted people to remember me as the keeper of Thomas's legacy, the protector of Cole's Market, the person who wouldn't let darkness swallow what we built. That night I went home and stood alone in the kitchen. I opened an old cabinet and took out the blue cooler, the one that used to make me shake every time I saw it. I wiped off the dust and set it on the high shelf in my office, not to hide from it, but to remember. Every time my eyes land on it, I'll remember. I was there. I survived. I stood back up. And I will never let myself be pushed into the dark again. The next morning, like always, I went to the store. I worked the register for 2 straight hours, greeted each customer, counted back change, asked about their kids and their families. People looked at me not as a victim, but as a familiar part of Cole's Market, and I knew that in doing that, I had reclaimed not just the company, but my life. Some losses never fully heal, but some people stay, quietly rekindling a flame from the ashes. After the trial, when everything seemed shattered, I knew I had to look around at the faces that patiently stayed with me in the conference room, the hands that never left the shelves, and the hearts that never gave up. They were the lifeblood Cole's Market still had. I decided to promote Owen, the loyal, sharp nephew who can see ahead to acting CFO. He's young, just 30, but he's already proven himself with transparency and integrity. I gave him more than a title. I gave him my trust. You'll be this company's eyes. From now on, Not a single dollar leaves without your signature. At the same time, I formed an internal ethics committee, a small group of longtime employees, and store reps with the authority to question any decision, including mine. I'd learned a hard truth. Power without checks can swallow a family whole. Bianca, the young nurse who helped save me with her courage, decided to change careers. I hired her to run safety for the entire Kohl's system. Her job is to oversee all cold storage operations, make sure every process meets standards, and most importantly, train employees on emergencies so no one ever gets trapped in darkness and cold like we did. Ruth, the woman who once shook beside me in that freezer, became sanitation supervisor for the whole chain. I doubled her pay not as charity, but as the recognition she deserved. I personally mounted a plaque at our largest store. Kohl's Market thanks Ruth for surviving and for standing up. On reopening day, her eyes were red, and the staff applause seemed endless. I also created the Thomas Cole Scholarship Fund for employees' children. Each child can receive support to attend college or pursue any trade they dream of. I remember Thomas saying, "We don't just feed our family. We plant seeds for the next generation." The scholarship is my way of keeping that promise, even with him gone. At the same time, we launched an anonymous hotline to report misconduct. Employees can call, text, or email without revealing their names. Every report is handled. Seriously, I want them to know their voices matter more than any dry report. On the day we reopened store number 3, I stood at the door watching the line form. We called it a community market. There's a section for essentials sold at cost so families in need won't feel shut out. There's a local produce counter where farmers can bring their vegetables and fruits and have a place to sell. No flash, no gimmicks, just a space that truly belongs to the community. When the new sign lit up, I heard an older man say to his wife, "This is the Kohl's Market I remember." I smiled and felt my heart warm. Slowly but surely, local organizations returned. Churches ordered bread in bulk for Sunday suppers. The Veterans Group bought frozen meat for a fundraiser. The high school baseball club placed orders for drinks and snacks for the season. Each contract and invoice brought not only revenue, but the trust that we'd been forgiven. I also started visiting every store. I sat with employees and listened to complaints about missing trays, a finicky barcode scanner, even the produce lights being too dim. I wrote down every small thing. I know trust isn't built on big speeches, it's built by hearing what seems trivial. The team came to understand a rule that never changes at Kohl's Market: respect first, profit second. A customer's nod or a heartfelt thank you is sometimes worth more than a few percentage points of margin. One late afternoon, I stood under the awning of store number 1 watching the sunset paint the lot red. Young staff walked out smiling, waving to me like family. I realized the chain had started to come back to life not through miracles, but through the people who stayed, the hearts that chose loyalty over betrayal. Kohl's Market had once been strangled from within, but now it was reviving from the inside out, and I knew as long as people stayed, that flame would never die. After a storm, the hardest part isn't cleaning a debris, it's learning to live with the cracks that remain. My family, Kohl's Market, and my own heart carry deep wounds, but I knew if we kept staring only at what was lost, we'd never go any further. My daughter Nora chose to lead CSR, our corporate social responsibility work. She's the gentlest of my 3, the one who fainted from crying when she heard Aiden's sentence. Now she's standing up, using that sensitivity to reconnect Kohl's Market with the community. She set up a fund for neighborhood kids, partnered with churches, and launched fair shopping days where staff and customers choose products together from transparent sources. Lucas moved closer to the company too, but not in a core management role. He works as an operations advisor for the in-store restaurant model we rolled out so shoppers can eat food made from local produce while they shop. Lucas knows food. He spent years cooking part-time in school. I saw a light in his eyes as he tested new dishes and realized this might be how he found joy again after all the strain. As for me, I started writing a succession plan. The brutal lessons from Aiden's unchecked power taught me no one, not even me, should ever have one signature decides all. Power must be distributed. Major decisions must pass at least 2 approvals. Employees must have the right to question. I wrote each line in fountain pen, slow and slanted, a promise to the next generation. Cole's Market will never become one person's playground again. We also began another hard journey, family group therapy. The first time we sat in that room, me, Nora, Lucas, and our nephew Owen, none of us spoke for a long time. The therapist asked, "Where would you like to start?" Silence. Then Nora choked out, "Can we talk about shame? About having a brother, a son, like that?" The question cut deep, but it needed to be said. In later sessions, we learned to name our pain, to acknowledge it instead of letting it bleed in silence. We learned to cry in front of each other without shame and to laugh again, even if the laughter was hesitant. For me, after many sleepless nights, I finally wrote a letter to Aiden. I didn't forgive his crimes. I didn't gloss over the truth, but I acknowledged the hurt he carried, the shadow of a father he felt he could never outrun Thomas's shadow. I wrote, "You chose the wrong path, and I can never forgive that. But I recognize your pain is real. You didn't need to become another Thomas. It's a shame you never chose to understand." I mailed the letter. I never got a reply, and that's fine. Some doors close and don't need reopening. Meanwhile, Cole's Market settled back into orbit. Our first post-crisis quarterly report came out. Clean, transparent, not a single shady expense. Market share returned to pre-Aiden levels. Vendors stabilized. Customers kept coming back. Walking through the town's side streets, I heard people say, "Cole's Market stood firm." They made it through. One afternoon at store number 1, I ran into a longtime customer, Martha, who'd bought rice weekly for 20 years. She put a hand on my shoulder, eyes bright. "Thank you for not running away." I squeezed her hand and smiled. "We're neighbors. Where would I go?" That weekend, I went to check the cold storage. Ruth stood there, gloves on, carefully signing the sanitation log. She turned to me with a bright grin. "If you ever left, I think the whole freezer would miss you." I laughed. A real laugh, warm and easy after so many cold months. In that moment I understood, even though my family had lost a piece of itself, even though my heart bears a scar that will never fade, Cole's Market remains. And in that laughter, I knew I wasn't alone. The ones who stayed, Nora, Lucas, Owen, Bianca, Ruth, and hundreds of employees, are my extended family. I turned 80 on a crisp fall morning in Ohio. The maples out front were gold, dropping in waves across the brick path Thomas once laid by hand. Time moves fast. Sometimes I swear it was just yesterday we sat in that tiny Main Street room, counting every penny to open our first store. Now, after loss, betrayal, and this strange resurrection, I'm still here, still me, but not the woman I was. People ask me if I have regrets. I just smile. Every pain, every scar, every near collapse, they're proof of the choice I made, not to quit. If you only look at ashes, you only see loss. Look closer, under the ash, and you'll find new shoots pushing through. I didn't throw a big birthday party. I invited my kids, grandkids, a few old friends, and longtime staff to my small house. The meal was simple: roast chicken, a vegetable salad from local farms, and Nora's homemade apple pie. On the table I placed an old photo, me and Thomas standing in front of the very first Cole's store, the signs still rough, our smiles unaware of any storms ahead. At dinner, Owen poured me a glass of red wine. He whispered, "You saved all of us. Not just the company, you saved our faith." I clinked glasses, looking into the steady eyes of Owen, of Lucas, of Nora. The new generation had grown up. They no longer carried the heavy shadow Aiden once bore. They knew right from wrong, and more than that, they understood the value of honesty. I spent the days after writing a kind of legacy, not just a will of assets, but a record of the values I wanted to leave behind. I wrote about the early days of starting out, the bitter winters when Thomas and I shoveled snow while opening the store for customers. I wrote about mornings starting at 4 a.m. to deliver goods, and the sleepless nights guarding the warehouse for fear of loss. I wrote about Aiden choosing the path of betrayal, and I also wrote that his tragedy didn't erase everything that remained. In every line, I tried to plant one thing, that Cole's Market was never just a supermarket, it was a community built on trust. People could buy the same products elsewhere, but only when they trusted did they choose to return. One afternoon, I sat in my office, looking out the window. I saw Ruth teaching new employees how to clean the cold storage, her voice clear and firm. I saw Bianca beside her checking safety logs, working with a smile. And I saw longtime customers walk in, so familiar that I could remember what they bought the day before just by seeing their faces. These seemingly small things were the new shoots growing from the ashes. I understood that one day I would no longer be here. But by then, Cole's Market would not collapse again. I had done everything to make sure of that. I often ended my days sitting on the porch, watching the sunset fall over the town. Sometimes an elderly neighbor would stop by, buy a little produce, and stay to chat. Sometimes a young couple brought their child to the supermarket and told me how safe they felt knowing our goods were clean and fair. These stories filled the hollow in my heart, the hollow left after losing a child in the cruelest way. The ashes never disappeared. They stayed there, gray and heavy, but the shoots could not be buried. They still grew, green and strong, in their own way. I am Virginia Cole. I have lived a life full of storms, building from one corner store to 5 supermarkets, from unconditional pride in a child to the day I had to witness his fall beyond redemption. I did not choose those losses, but I chose to stand, to protect what still held value, and to plant new seeds for the next generation. If there is one thing I want to leave for everyone, it is this. When life throws you into the ashes, don't only mourn, look for the shoots. Because life always begins again in places we thought were dead. And before I close this story, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to you, the one who patiently stayed with me through this long journey. Your presence makes me believe that stories like mine are not only meant to be told, but to remind us all that resilience, trust, and humanity still have a place in this world. Where are you listening from? I would love to know the city, town, or country you're in. Please leave it in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, hit like, subscribe, and share so we can spread this flame of strength together.